Thank you so much. And if everyone could take a moment right now at the beginning and silence your cell phones, I would really appreciate it. So I want to say welcome and thank you for taking the time to come to the program tonight. Gun laws are something that are on everyone's mind. Civilian, law enforcement, shopkeepers, parents, teachers, and grandparents. It's a time when this topic is both on our minds and in our hearts. Whatever your particular position is on the gun laws in this country, the first step is to understand what the current gun laws actually are that affect us and what may be coming next. To that end, we here at the League of Women Voters have brought you this presentation by the Chief Law Enforcement Officer in our county, the District Attorney, Madeline Singas. Remember, the DA is not a politician. She does not lobby for positions. She is the foremost authority on what the law is and what might be coming up and what we can help do on a local level to make our community a safer place. I want to tell you that there will be hopefully time for questions at the end of the presentation. There will be League of Women Voters members with index cards and pencils. If you would like to write out a question, feel free to raise your hand and they will come to you with an index card and a pencil, and you can hand it back to one of the members, and then you can get your question asked that way. So let me tell you about the organization bringing you this forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization working to promote democracy by helping to create an informed electorate. The League never takes a position on individual candidates. It studies issues important to our democracy, comes to an agreement on a position after study, and lobbies candidates to support League positions. The League also registers voters, compiles and distributes information about voter registration deadlines and about the candidates running for office. We hope that you will take home a membership brochure for yourself or someone in your family. And remember, the League is not for women only. Our president is Julie Mirharnik, sitting here today, and I'm here to tell you she is a wonderful leader and a pleasure to work with. And now I'd like to tell you about the district attorney. As district attorney, Madeline Singas has focused efforts on combating drug and gun trafficking, violent gangs, and sexual assaults. Using innovative investigative strategies, collaborative partnerships, and intelligence-based prosecution models, she has effectively dismantled narcotics and gang enterprises within Nassau County and beyond its borders. She has dedicated unprecedented resources to battle the epidemic of heroin and opiate abuse plaguing Nassau County, prioritizing education to prevent addiction and treatment of those abusing drugs. In addition, she is committed to aggressively investigating and combating government corruption to protect taxpayers from those who abuse the public trust. Madeline's priorities are driven and informed by more than 2 decades of experience as a courtroom prosecutor, trying and overseeing thousands of criminal cases. She began her career as an assistant district attorney in Queens at the height of the crack wars, working her way through the ranks prosecuting murderers, batterers, and other violent criminals. In 2006, she joined the Nassau County District Attorney's Office as the chief of Nassau's newly created Special Victims Bureau, bringing her expertise to serve the most vulnerable victims, children, the elderly, victims of domestic and sexual abuse. In 2011, Madeline was appointed Chief Assistant District Attorney and worked to design and implement specialized programs for adolescent offenders, veterans, and those who suffer from mental illness or drug addiction. She was elevated to the role of District Attorney in January 2015 and elected to a 4-year term in November 2015. The daughter of Greek immigrants, Madeline grew up in Astoria. She is a graduate of the Bronx High School of Science, Barnard College, Columbia University, and Fordham University Law School. I had the pleasure of working for District Attorney Singas when I was a brand new assistant district attorney in Queens County working in the Domestic Violence Bureau. She was the type of deputy chief who led by setting an example of dedication and integrity. As a resident of Nassau County, I was thrilled when we elected a prosecutor and not a politician to serve our county. I am so pleased to present you the District Attorney of Nassau County, Madeline Singas. Thank you. Do I need this? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. How about that? Okay, technical issues. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jessica, for that very generous introduction. And I have to say that Jessica is one of my finest prosecutors, really advocating for women and children and
being there 1,000%, just giving it her all. So I was sad when she left, but very happy that our paths have crossed again. And thank you, Julie. And thank you all for being here. And I love speaking to groups like this. I feel like this is in my face, but just because I know this community. I'm a Manhasset resident, and I know that all of you care very deeply about these issues and about our communities. And all of you could be home with your families, and instead you chose to come and listen to what's going on in Nassau County, and hopefully I'll answer some of your questions about the landscape of gun violence in our country and in Nassau County. The good news is that we have experienced record crime drops here in Nassau County. So since 2013 to 2018, we've had a 25% reduction in index crimes, which are most violent crimes, and a smattering of property crimes. That's a pretty staggering statistic, and we're really proud of that statistic, and we work hard every day so that we can keep that downward trend going. And just so you know, the rest of the country and the rest of the state is also on that downward trend, but not by the numbers that we're seeing in Nassau County. So we're really proud of the work that we do in the office. A lot of our intelligence gathering, working with our law enforcement partners, both on the local, state, and federal levels. So we're really proud of that. You know, we have to talk about gun violence because it's something that I see every day. I have seen every day since I became a prosecutor in 1991. It's something that affects our communities. It's something that I care about deeply, obviously, as a district attorney, but also as a parent. I have twins who are 16 years old, who are in high school. And, you know, I know for me, as I'm sure for you, it bothers me when I have to talk to my kids about guns in schools. It's something that I never had to confront. I never had to think about where the closest exit was to my classroom just in case an armed shooter came into the school. So that level of stress and anxiety is something that we didn't have to live with, but now unfortunately our children do. So it's things that we talk about with them in our own families, and when we go out to schools, we talk to kids about that because you know, you can't underestimate what that kind of stress does to kids. So hopefully we'll live in a society again where they don't have to worry about that. But for right now, you know, it's on the minds of your children and your grandchildren, and it's something you should be talking to them about. So let's talk about what gun violence looks like across the country. So according to the CDC, guns are the third leading cause of death for American children aged 1 to 17. Third leading cause. In the first 5 months of 2018 were deadlier for American school children than they were for American troops in combat zones. Okay? In 2016, 59% of gun deaths in the United States were suicides. Things that people don't talk about often connect gun violence to suicides, 59%. Firearm homicide is the leading cause of death for African American males aged 15 to 34. Women who are DV victims whose abusers own guns are 5 times more likely to be killed than women who are with abusers who don't own guns. 5 times more likely when a gun is introduced. So that's why we should care about the state of gun laws in the United States, in our state, and in Nassau County. Because gun safety laws have tremendous power. There have been several analyses done, and you know, you should look at these websites, Giffords, Everytown, Moms Demand Action. There's so many great studies out there. But the bottom line is, you know, it's been demonstrated that stronger gun laws help reduce gun deaths and gun violence. It seems pretty commonsensical, right? The 10 states with the highest gun death rates have some of the weakest gun laws in the nation, okay? And I say that because sometimes people I guess I'm an attorney, so I always like facts and figures. So when people approach me with things, I like to give them the facts. And I like to arm, no pun intended, others with those facts so that they can engage in smart and responsible debate about what it is that we're talking about. And I have to say that in New York and in our county, I feel like things, and in the state, in the country, things are changing. So for the first time, oh, hi Dina, I see Dina, Assemblywoman. How are you? Good. I'm sorry I didn't see you back there. I don't know if we have any other elected officials. No. Yeah, and right, from the Civilian Police Commissioner, yes. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So on the federal level, right, a law requiring universal background checks has just passed the House for the first time in more than 2 decades, and that was Congressman King. So we're really proud of that effort, and I was really happy when I read that. I don't know what's going to happen, but the fact that in 20 years we never had that kind of bipartisanship surrounding a gun issue is something that we should be talking about, we should be celebrating, and we should be writing our representatives and telling them how important it is for something as simple as a universal background check. And here's the thing also that sometimes bothers me, because I talk to a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people who are responsible gun owners. I talk to NRA members, and a lot of people believe in some of these things, but you would never know it, right? Because the dialogue around it is so divisive, and how it's covered and how people speak about it, and sometimes how our elected leaders vote on these issues, even though their constituents would say, you know what, someone who's on a no-flight zone shouldn't have a gun. And I agree with that whether I'm in the NRA or not in the NRA. So some of these what we call common sense proposals somehow don't bubble up to our elected officials. There's a disconnect there, and that's something that all of us can do to make sure that our voices are heard and that we're properly being represented by our elected officials. So fortunately, our state legislature, our governor, has done an incredible job making some of these common sense proposals into law in New York. So it started in 2013, Governor Cuomo and the SAFE Act, and that was written and passed in the wake of Sandy Hook. And according to the governor, it was the toughest gun control laws in the nation, and that started sort of the ball rolling. We know that since the SAFE Act was passed, the number of violent crimes committed with a firearm dropped 1.2%, and New York now has the lowest suicide rate of any state. And this year has been tremendously productive. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but right out of the gate, we've had some incredible gun laws passed, and they include an extreme risk protection order. So basically what that is, a law that permits law enforcement officials, family members, and even school officials, that's okay. I'm sure my phone's going to blow up soon. I have an event with my daughter later. She's waiting for me somewhere, and she's 16, so, like if I'm late, I'm never going to hear the end of it. So the extreme risk protection order, and I don't know if you've ever seen Linda Beagle-Schulman speak. So she lost her son. He was murdered in Parkland. He was a teacher, and he was trying to save his children, his students, and he was shot and killed. And she said that if there was a law like the extreme protection risk order in place, then maybe those guns could have been seized from that gunman. Because what we know is that he himself had called 911, people had called 911 about him. His teachers, when he was at school, noticed that there was something that was not right with him. And had something like this existed, people could have called in, made a petition to a court, and removed those guns from him, with due process, I think it's for a year, and it can be renewed again. So it both allows law enforcement officials to take guns, and schools and school officials can phone in, as well as family members can request the order, and it also prevents these people from actually getting guns in the first place. So dual purpose, and it's passed here. So the other law that's recently passed is preventing school districts from allowing teachers to be armed. You know, and that's raised some controversy all across the state and all across the country. Should school teachers be armed? In New York, they cannot. So if you're not a school security official or a law enforcement official, you can't carry a gun on school grounds. They also improved laws in New York. We've passed bills that improve background checks, that ban bump stocks. And you know what bump stocks are? You just attach it to the bottom of a gun, and it can turn a regular gun into an automatic weapon, and you can spray more rounds of ammunition. Again, like, you know, nobody needs that, in my opinion. You're not hunting with that, you know, so common sense. Also improving gun buyback procedures. This is you know, an important one, a bill that requires out-of-state applicants for gun permits to allow New York authorities to review out-of-state mental health records. So New York now has the ability to check that for people who are asking for gun permits. So, you know, we have a lot of great senators and assembly people who are working on those bills, and I thank them all for their hard work. Earlier this week, a bill passed that's really, you know, again, close to my heart. It's a safe storage bill. And, you know, it didn't receive a lot of attention normally, but the stats on safe storage are pretty unbelievable. So our state now requires gun owners to keep their firearms in a locked cabinet if there are children around who are 16 years old or younger in the home. Last month I was in Texas. I belong to an organization called Prosecutors Against Gun Violence, and it's a bipartisan organization. And there's prosecutors there from everywhere, from California, from Texas, everywhere across the country, and we get together, depending on what's going on. Sometimes we get together and meet in Washington, D.C. and go speak to elected officials there. Sometimes we just meet for conferences to see, like, what's going on in California, what can we do in New York, what's happening in Nevada. So I was there speaking about safe storage. And because we know that, you know, weapons in the hands of children, in the hands of the mentally ill, and in the hands of those contemplating suicide can lead to death, right? So we know that if a gun is stored safely, we may be able to prevent those deaths. You know, we've seen in, unfortunately, several of our school shootings, kids or young adults who had access to their parents' unsecured guns and then used those to commit mass killings in school. So a Gifford study in 2018 found that 4.6 million American children live in a home with a loaded and unsecured firearm. Of the homes with children and firearms, 55% reportedly had one or more firearms in an unlocked place, 43% of which lacked trigger locks. So again, when you think about children and you think about an unsecured gun and the curiosity of kids, it's a pretty scary statistic. So the same study alarmingly found that 73% of children under age 9 knew the location of their parents' firearm, and 36% acknowledged that they actually handled that firearm. So the research really shows the gravity of the problem and gives context to these tragedies that we see from accidental shootings at the hands of children or involving children. 89% of accidental shooting deaths among children occur in the home, 89%. And most are caused by a child playing with an unsecure loaded gun without their parents' knowledge. More than 75% of the guns utilized in teen suicide attempts were stored in the homes of their own families or their friends. 18 children and young adults die each day from gun-related injuries. That's every day. So these are preventable with safe storage. 31% of unintentional firearm deaths might be stopped by the use of a child-proof safety lock and a loading indicator. You know, in one of the states, I can't remember which DA it was that gave a presentation to us in Houston, and she said that what she did is bought a number of trigger locks and gave them to pediatricians. So when children and their parents would go in for their well visits, starting from when they were very young, one of the questions that the pediatrician would ask is, do you have a gun in your home, and is it safely stored, and do you have a trigger lock? And if they said they didn't have a trigger lock, pediatricians would be handing out trigger locks to parents to make sure that guns are not left unsecured. So I thought that was really interesting, and she said it's a really successful program, and it sort of comes at gun control from a wholly different, you know, point of view, just as a health crisis, as a public health crisis. Again, so legislation is one step. We work a lot with education, making sure that we talk to our kids about things like guns, handling guns. We talk to responsible gun owners about what that means for them, and are they keeping their weapons secure if they have them legally. So safe storage saves lives, and it's an important law, so I'm glad that we have it. I mean, locally, that's sort of the landscape of where we are on the gun front, gun legislation. The one thing that's out there that I think is, actually the safe storage is on the governor's desk, so I don't think it's signed yet. As of a couple hours ago it wasn't, so I'm not sure if it's signed yet. I don't know if you've heard conversations or discussions about Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act. And basically, we were dealing with that last year. I have a feeling we'll be dealing with it again this year. And basically what that says is that if you've obtained a concealed carry permit in any state, regardless of how vigorous or lenient that state's gun laws are enabling you to get that concealed carry permit, you could then bring that gun into New York. And we couldn't do anything about that, because as long as the person had that gun and that concealed carry permit legally from the state from which they came, then New York couldn't do anything about it. And you know, law enforcement joined very quickly against that proposition, because think about that when you think about places like Times Square or the Roosevelt Field Mall. And if we don't know who has a gun and who doesn't have a gun, and think about that from a law enforcement perspective, the police officers, our police officers, will now have to know what the laws are in 50 states when they're determining whether someone is properly carrying that weapon or not. So it's going to make for a lot of confusion. It's going to make for a lot more guns in New York. And that's something that all of you should read up about and talk to your elected leaders and write to them about it. But law enforcement stands very much against that proposition. So what are we doing locally? You know, I'm proud of the work that we do in our office every day. So many of our cases involve gun violence. So many of our gangs are trafficking in both narcotics and weapons. A lot of our domestic violence cases, unfortunately, a lot of our domestic violence homicides are caused by guns. You know, abusers who have guns in the home and then turn them on their victims. So we obviously prosecute those cases to the fullest extent that we can. It's something that we don't tolerate in the county, and it's something that has a high priority in my office. We do a lot of information sharing and intel sharing with NCPD. Commissioner Ryder and I speak often. We sit on a lot of commissions together, as do my assistants, and his police officers and detectives. We figure out who are the people who are driving crime. We figure out what are the crime hotspots. We figure out where guns are coming from. We talk to the feds. We sit on task forces. So we're doing a lot. We're being very proactive as well as reactive to the arrests are made involving guns. I mean, one thing that we do, which is also something that's a little different, is a gun buyback. And we just had one last weekend. I was there last weekend in Uniondale. And basically what that is people bring in their guns and we give them money. And we don't ask any questions about those guns. And we recovered 366 guns last weekend. And people say to me, do you think that made a difference? I'm like, yeah, I do. 366 guns off of our streets in Nassau County. You can't measure, people say, well, what does that translate to? I don't know. I can't measure a negative. Like, I can't tell you how many shootings didn't happen as a result of somebody not having access to that weapon in their home. How many kids didn't play with that gun. How many despondent people didn't pick up a gun and decide to use it that day. But 366 guns, that's pretty incredible. We had 28 assault rifles and 228 handguns. Now, we believe none of the 228 handguns were legally possessed. Some of them, in fact, were defaced with the serial numbers carved off, so that's a sure indication that these guns were actively used criminally in the streets before we got them. All 28 assault weapons are illegal. It was really eye-opening. 10 guns were turned in that were fully loaded. We had a teenager, about 15-year-old, came in and gave us a gun that he or she had in a sack. It was a fully loaded weapon, and it had one bullet in the chamber. So, some pressure on the trigger, and that was discharging. We acquired 6 pen guns, so the kinds that you see like in spy novels or movies. Well, we had them. We had one woman turn in a pink-clad assault rifle. We got a Tech 9, which is, basically just a killing machine. No professional, law enforcement professional, gun enthusiast, homeowner needs a Tech 9. In fact, police officers sometimes refer to them as spray and pray because they're wildly inaccurate. Really shocking, shocking for me to see that those were some of the guns that we recovered right here in Nassau County. It's the second best haul that we've had of assault rifles in Nassau County. So those are things that we're going to continue to do, again, because taking one gun off the street, as far as I'm concerned, will keep our law enforcement officers safe, will keep family members safe, will keep all of us safer. The other thing that I did as a result of Parkland was I created a school safety task force because, when we were listening to the news reports and when we were getting briefed by law enforcement officials on Parkland, it was upsetting to me to see that there were a lot of signs that people either missed or felt that they couldn't do anything about. And I said, you know what? We live in a time now where something like this could feasibly happen in Nassau County. I mean, it keeps me up at night. I hope it never happens in this county, but we've had so many of these across urban communities, suburban communities, in movie theaters, in churches, in schools. We have to be prepared. So I said, I never want to be in a position of waking up the next day and saying, wait a minute, what do we know about this shooter? And when did we know it? And could we have done something to prevent it? So I established a school safety task force. Again, it's not only for school safety, it's to improve the safety at all other soft targets that may exist in the county, our major hospitals, mosques, churches, synagogues, movie theaters. What we basically recognize is that we need coordination and standardization of our planning and response protocols. And we're lucky to have a commissioner like Commissioner Ryder, who has equipped all the schools with a RAVE app on their phones. All school officials have one. that if they press it, it goes right to the police department. Police officers are dispatched immediately. Most schools in the county have also given their floor plans to the police, so not only are the police officers en route, they know exactly where they're going, they know the layout of the school, so if somebody says he's in the library, they'll know where the library is, as opposed to losing precious time trying to figure it out. A lot of our police officers visit the schools and take a walk around again in their sectors to familiarize themselves with where the layout of the school, so that we can, because look, in these situations, it's all about time. If we can get there faster, more lives are saved. That's the bottom line. So in our task force, we included, obviously, law enforcement, federal, state, local, school administrators, school children, teachers, mental health professionals, parents. We included leaders from our hospital systems, security professionals from our major commercial organizations, faith leaders, civil rights leaders, including the New York CLU, because we want to make sure that we are protecting an individual's civil rights while at the same time making sure that we're doing everything we can to maintain safety. So it brought a lot of varied perspectives, and I'm hoping that in the next few weeks we'll be able to issue that report. You know, again, we discovered that there's a lot of information that remains siloed. You know, when you're talking about 26 law enforcement agencies just in Nassau County, right? So do we know what the Long Beach Police know? Do we know what Glen Cove knows or Port Washington knows? Do we know in all of these school districts, 56 school districts, do we have information? Are we sharing it across the board? Is there a way that we can make sure that those of us in law enforcement get the information that we need and we can act accordingly, direct someone to services, help a family through a troubled time? Those are sort of our goals here, because I don't want that information siloed and we're ever in a position of saying, well, I knew that, but I didn't know what to do with that. So hopefully we're going to get those reports out to all our school administrators, and it'll be a how-to of what to do if you think that someone's in trouble, if you're fearful that something like that might happen. Same thing in our churches. Maybe somebody doesn't feel comfortable going to a school to say something because they don't want to put a blemish on that student's life from that point forward, and they talk to their faith leaders or they talk to their congregation. Well, what can they do so that they can get us the information, and what can we do to make sure, again, that we're getting people services that they need, we're taking away guns if we need to, and we're making sure that we're keeping our residents safe. So that work, again, is ongoing. I hope to report it soon. I can send that out. I'll give you another stat from DCJS, which is up in Albany, our Division of Criminal Justice Services. So in 2016, we had 314 violent crimes in our county that involved the use of a firearm. In 2017, that number was reduced to 206. And just for a comparison, and not to brag, Queens had 932 and Suffolk had 364. So we're doing things right in Nassau County. I'm proud to be your district attorney. I'm proud to be the chief law enforcement officer of this county. There's work to be done. I welcome you all in our efforts to educate people, to educate ourselves about these issues, so that we can speak intelligently and make sure that our elected leaders do what we've elected them to do. So thank you very much. No, I gotta go. I know I was gonna take some questions, but I realized I spoke for much longer than I should have.
We're gonna mic Teresa up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Teresa.
We're gonna mic Teresa up.
Teresa's here from my office. Excellent. Thank you all very much.
So as you can see, unfortunately, the DA has to leave, but the good news is one of the executive directors of our office is here and willing to take some questions as long as she's got the time. Can I mic you up, Teresa? This is Assistant District Attorney Teresa Tebbett-Kubek.
The DA is a tough act to follow, I'll tell you that, but I'm happy to field some of the questions.
The first question we have is there a hotline you can call in Nassau if you know somebody that has an illegal gun?
Sure, so our office does have a hotline or a tip line that you can call to report any concerns that you might have, criminal activity, things like that. I can give that number. Obviously, if you have an immediate concern, the best call is to 911 so that the police can respond and handle the situation. But if it's something that you feel is less urgent, but a concern that you want to bring to our office's attention, the number for that is 516-571-7755. And again, that can direct you to different parts of our office for anything that might be of concern in your community.
This is a question about how many guns do you estimate, if you know, are sold illegally in Nassau County?
That's a tough one. I wouldn't be able to give you an accurate number on that, but we certainly see cases where we're prosecuting people for those illegal gun sales. And we have a bureau in our office that's called our Special Narcotics Operations and Gangs Bureau that primarily handles those cases. So they're working both long-term investigations to find out who are bringing illegal guns into our county to sell them, or who are, sort of harboring or transporting those to other parts of the state to sell them. And they are a busy bureau, I can tell you that.
Ammunition serial numbers. Do we do it in Nassau? And if not, can we do it in Nassau?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but if whoever asked that question wants to see me at the end, I'll give you my card and you can email me that question and I will get you the answer.
All right. What is the law in New York regarding gun show purchases?
So to purchase a firearm legally in New York from a gun show, you have to fill out an application. There's a waiting period, which once the governor signs those new laws on his desk will be extended, I believe, from 3 days to 10 days. And they do a background check. So they're checking the federal database for anybody who has a flag, like a red flag, if you've heard them say like the red flag laws, to see if there's some disqualifier that would prohibit that person from purchasing that gun. So a disqualifier can be something like a conviction for a felony, or in New York, a disqualifier is a conviction for what they call a crime of domestic violence. So almost a year ago, June of last year, New York State expanded the number of crimes that would qualify as a disqualifier to include all sorts of family offenses with family relationships and designated crimes, and they expanded the list from 4 to I think about 20, and all of those things would be a disqualifier if they popped up in your background check that you would then not be able to complete that purchase.
Can you talk a little bit about the situations where a permit is taken away, for example, like a criminal order of protection, something like that, but the gun itself is not taken away? That situation.
So there was a new law in New York, again, I think it was June of last year, that if there's a court order, like an order of protection, that can suspend somebody's ability to possess a gun, or if it's a permanent order of protection at the end of a case, like that's coming along with a conviction, somebody's permit or ability to purchase a gun would be revoked for a period of time. But those orders will also contain a provision that any guns the person currently possesses have to be surrendered to the local police department. So whether it's a town or a village or the county police department, they have to be surrendered, so that during the pendency of the order that says you can't legally possess that gun, you don't actually have it. One thing that they did to expand that is that now judges are required to make an inquiry of the person before them, so say the defendant in a criminal case, to inquire if the person possesses any guns, And if the person says that they do, then the court orders them to be surrendered, and then the court has to contact the local police authority. So, say Nassau County Police Department, as well as the state police, to inform the police that they've issued a surrender order, that this person has indicated that they have weapons, and the court has ordered them to surrender it, so that the police can then follow up and make sure that that happens, and then they have to report back to the court to notify them that that has or hasn't been done. So it's sort of a number of checks along the way to make sure that those guns are not in the hands of people who are not legally allowed to have them anymore.
What happens once you call 911 to report that a person who has a gun is mentally ill? Specifically, are the weapons taken during the investigation or after?
So the police will respond and they'll make an assessment of the situation, and depending on what the specific circumstances are, those guns can be taken by the police. Maybe it's temporarily until they can bring the person to a hospital if they're, needing that sort of treatment because they're actively suffering from some sort of mental illness. And now that we have the new extreme risk protection order provision that's about to be signed, then that gives us another measure and another ability for those guns to be taken away.
How are current gun owners informed of new gun laws that affect them?
That's a good question. Meaning, are they specifically notified of things changing? I don't know that there's any sort of notice provision that goes out to anybody who is in sort of the database of people who have gun permits. But maybe that's something that we should work on because they should be notified.
One last question.
Sure.
How do you feel about requiring gun owners to purchase insurance and register weapons?
So people do have to register their weapons, but whether or not they have to purchase insurance on that, I don't know what the DA's opinion would be on that. I can certainly pose that question to her if somebody wants to see me to follow up on that. I mean, I would imagine that there are pros and cons to that, because then you have a recourse if somebody is held liable under their insurance company and something happens. There's certainly an argument to be made for the benefits of that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for having us.
Bob, can you just have a seat? Thank you.
So, first of all, I want to thank you for coming today. I want to thank the district attorney and the executive, director, assistant district attorney Teresa Tabit-Kubek. I'd also like to thank the community members of the League of Women Voters who helped me put this together: Helen Kotsky, Betty Camisa, Fran Furtado, Jessica Roush, and of course, Julie Mir-Harnick. I would like to thank the library for the use of this beautiful facility and for setting it up for us. We always generally appreciate being here. And of course, I would like to thank you for taking the time to come tonight. I have one more announcement, and that is that there will be a Meet the Candidates night for candidates who would like to join the Library Board of Trustees here in the library at 7:45 on Wednesday, March 27th. So that's something to look out for, that you may want to come and check out and see who the candidates are. You'll have a chance to pose questions. The candidates will tell you about themselves, and they're going to end up running our public library. So that's very important news. Thank you very much for your time, and have a wonderful evening.